I started to realize that, high net worth investors don't own rentals directly. You don't want the liability, you don't want the debt burden in your own personal name, you want it in your commercial business. And you also want like scalability. Around this time, I started to join different masterminds to get around other higher net worth doctors, lawyers, engineers, other working professionals. And they invested as a passive LP investor into dozens of these little deals where it's 100 or 300 unit apartment complex where a general partnership manages the asset, manages the manager, and investors don't get any loans in their name and they don't do anything. They just cash their checks. That's all they do.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I have the pleasure of bringing back one of our more popular guests from the past. This is Lane Kawanda. Lane, are you there?
Hey, thanks for having me, Richard.
Awesome. And Lane, you have a podcast called Simple Passive Cash Flow. Is that right?
That's correct. Been doing it since 2016, and hopefully it helps a lot of people get started in real estate, buying rentals, syndications, that type of stuff.
Yeah. You guys talk a lot about real estate investing and other things, and I know whenever we bring our returning guests back on, we've already heard your heroic stories, so we get in and talk a little about some of the fun topics that you guys actually teach. So I was looking through all of your stuff here today, and I thought it would be fun to talk about some of the counterintuitive wealth rules that the rich follow. And I know you got a few of them here, so I want to dive into this first one that you have. It says, "Don't buy a home to live in. Instead, buy rentals." So why don't you tell me a little bit about that and why that's an important rule and why it's counterintuitive?
Yeah, so before we get going, just preface it. A lot of this stuff is, more of my clients are more higher end, higher net worth doctors, lawyers, engineers, working professionals, guys pretty good with their money already. So, a lot of this stuff kind of flies in the face of your traditional Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey type of traditional financial dogma. But yeah, so like not investing in retirement accounts seems super irresponsible, right? But yeah, none of us do it for a variety of reasons. We'll kind of walk down the list here. So first of them, you're going to be paying taxes on your money regardless, either now in a 401k or later, or now in a Roth or later in a 401k. So pre-tax, post-tax, it's all the same. But we get to pretty much choose when we pay taxes on it. So most of us are, in kind of my world, our tax bracket is likely lower today than it is tomorrow. Most financial advice is predicated on the fact that, they think that you're going to quit your job, live in your home, and kind of shrivel up and die off a meager Social Security or lower tax bracket, right? I don't think that that's going to happen. I'm pretty optimistic guy, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a lot more richer in the future and be in a higher tax bracket in the future. Therefore, I want to pay my taxes on it today, get it out. Second reason, how else are we going to pay for all this government stimulus, right? These trillions of dollars to prop up a pandemic. But tax brackets will likely be going up in the future, and inflation will likely happen. Not in the next few years, but definitely in the next decade or two. So therefore, tax brackets are likely to be going up. Third reason, I've already retired. I'm 35 years old. Obviously, I want my money. I want to get at my money before I'm 70 or whatever age you need to get at that retirement money. Fourthly, and this is the big one, and this kind of transitions probably to our next topic, is we try to use these deductions, these paper losses from real estate investments today, so we don't pay taxes. I don't pay taxes.
Yeah.
Trump paid $750 to me. I
So
think he messed up. So you don't get the
so one of the
these
things that's
tons
always
of
been
losses from the investments unless you invest in a non-retirement account or non-self-directed IRA account or non-checkbook
yeah.
IRA account.
I remember the first time I was in a corporate meeting when I was running the marketing department for a big regional company. And they had their retirement person come in and they were like, hey, we're going to talk about how we can set up your 401ks. And I remember him getting up there and the first thing he said to everyone is like, for all of you people who want to, get to their retirement age and retire, you're all going to have a lower income bracket and blah, blah, blah. And I raised my hand and I was like, I don't plan on retiring less wealthy than I am now. I plan on retiring more wealthy. And I was like, wouldn't it make more sense to pay taxes on the seed money rather than paying taxes on your harvest later, which is what most people do, right? They put in money tax free out of their paycheck into their retirement accounts, and then it grows, hopefully. And then at the end, when they go to pull it out, then they get taxed on the harvest instead. And I, from the people I know that are a lot wealthier than myself, it's things like learning how to pay taxes on the seed and then let it grow tax free and have the harvest, the stuff that grows over time is where you want to get taxed at the beginning, not at the end.
Right, right. I mean, the whole point is that let's think for ourselves, like let's think logically through this, right? And think for yourselves and don't just go after the dogma, right? The guy who came in, gave you that presentation, his company and your company were in cahoots to get you into their program, right? He is not a financial expert. To me, you never take financial advice from somebody who's not financially free themselves or gets paid off commissions.
Absolutely. So why do you say that you should not buy a home, right? To instead buy rentals?
Yeah, so most of when you're investing in real estate, something as simple as like a turnkey rental property, buy a home rental, you're making like over 35% on your money when you factor in, maybe you're only making 5 to 10% in cash flow, the monthly revenues, um, income and expenses, but you're making money with mortgage pay down, the tenant's paying down your mortgage for you, so your equity is building up that way, and your leverage, and you're still getting the appreciation there, and you're also getting the tax benefits, so you pay less taxes. When
Yeah.
you add up all those you're making well over 35%. If people want to see a video breakdown of this, they can go to my website, simplepassivecashflow.com/returns. And if you don't trust me, go look it up for yourself and do the math for yourself. But why would you want to put your money in a house where all it does is keeps up with the pace of inflation when you could be making 30% on your money plus in Summer Avenue? And this is kind of where I discovered maybe over a decade ago, where I was like, well, how am I making 30% here when I'm making like 8 to 10% in my 401k stocks? I think this is one of the biggest mistakes like young couples make. They buy a big house, they buy a starter home that's 600 grand, and that's like $200,000 down payment, where they could have bought maybe 4, 6 houses out in the Midwest that are all cash flowing, growing the money at 20, 30%. It's just, and now that young couple has that big mortgage and they've lost all their cash flow and they've lost their options and now they're stuck. I will caveat saying, because this is a very emotional topic for a lot of people. They want that home to live in, but this is one of the most financially debilitating decision I think people make. But I still think it is for most people, because it's kind of like a forced savings account. A home is
Yeah.
like a mortgage you put your money to. But if you're financially responsible, fiscally responsible with your money, like maybe the minority of people out there, then there's a different way. There's a better way.
So the obvious question then is, if you're not going to buy a house and you're going to buy rentals and do other things and start creating the cash flow, are you recommending then that you rent a house to live in?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Interesting. So when it comes to renting a house, do you rent a house from your own company or do you rent a house from someone else?
Yeah, just from somebody else. I mean,
Or does
no,
it make
no
a difference?
games. Yeah, no games here. In terms of renting from my S corp or any kind of LLC or anything like that. No, just renting from some private person out there. I mean, put it this way: there's a lot of most investors are unsophisticated. Most of them are mom and pop investors that only own 1 or 2 rental properties, and they are just so lucky when somebody buys their or rents their house. There are a lot of really unsophisticated investors that buy higher end properties that the rent to value ratios don't work. I know we talked about last time, you're looking for a property that is 1% rent to value ratio or higher so that you can cash flow. So a house that's, likely over 300, $400,000, a potential property that you may want to live in as a rental, probably doesn't make financial sense to me, right? You want to be rent.
Yeah.
I mean, these properties don't work as a rental. Therefore, for you as a person living in there, it makes so much sense. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So there's a lot of unsophisticated investors allow you to get a good deal as a renter.
Right. I mean, we don't advocate for buying rentals in any primary markets like California, Washington, Seattle, Hawaii, New York, Miami, like those types of markets. And that's a lot where a lot of us choose to live, right? Because they're great places to live. Therefore, it's a great place to
Yeah,
live in a rental property because the numbers don't make sense for the buying.
it does. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then if you're investing in the rental properties and you're going through and you're doing, you're buying 3 or 4 of those renter homes instead of buying a home, um, when do you get to a point where you're looking at maybe expanding and moving into, I know like reading through your stuff, you've started investing in multifamily and other things and growing your portfolio that way.
Yeah, so probably around when your net worth gets to be about $500,000, give or take a 250,000, is when you start to get to a level where I was in 2015 when I had 11 rentals. I started to realize that high net worth investors don't own rentals directly. You don't want the liability, you don't want the debt burden in your own personal name. You want it in your commercial business, and you also want like scalability. For each rental property, great returns. Don't get me wrong, but it's only a few $100 of cash flow every month. You know, not gonna say
Hmm.
I'm not appreciative of that, but with 11 rentals, I had an eviction or two every year, some kind of big catastrophe that happened every quarter. And yeah, I'm having my property manager do all my dirty work for me, but with 11 rentals, it adds up, right? With 30 rentals,
Yeah.
it starts to become sort of a full-time job to manage the manager. And that's at the level that you kind of need to scale I mean, 10 rentals is just $3,000 passive a month. I don't know what American family
Yeah.
can survive on that. So you're gonna need 30 properties. So now you're talking about an eviction every other month, some kind of big catastrophe every other week. It's just not scalable. And this is where I started to, around this time, I started to join different masterminds to get around other higher net worth doctors, lawyers, engineers, other working professionals. And they invested in as a passive LP investor into dozens of these little deals where it's 100 or 300 unit apartment complex where a general partnership manages the asset, manages the manager, and investors don't get any loans in their name and they don't do anything. They just cash your checks. That's all they do.
That's interesting. So you're actually you're investing just the cash into the deal and getting some sort of an equity return.
Yeah, and the deal gets a loan, not in your name, but in the general partner's name. So you're being leveraged too, and you're also getting the tax benefits also. But also you're also there in these larger deals, you can do what's called a cost segregation, where it basically extracts way, way, way more, like 4 to 10 times as much losses in the first year as you would if you just would have bought a little single family home with the same amount of money. And that's where we're playing this game, right? With taxes, getting these passive losses.
Yeah. So can you explain a little bit what a passive loss is, and how that lowers your AGI, your adjusted gross income, and how that impacts taxes?
Yeah, so not a CPA, not a lawyer here, but I do know a thing or two, and I probably do know a lot more than a lot of CPAs who have a day job, and that's why they're stuck there. So the way I explain this is like there's ordinary income and there's passive income and passive losses. So there's a barrier between those. So when you make a passive income, like through your rentals, right? You have revenue, you pay your expenses, and you have cash flow. That's passive income, and you can use passive losses to offset that. How do you get passive losses? Well, you go buy equipment, or you can take a paper loss on the property. So with rental property, you can take 1/27th of the value of the improvement, the building value every year. So on a $350,000 house, you can take about maybe $6,000 every year. So that's your phantom, that's your paper loss, that's your passive loss that you can use to offset the income. And likely that usually exceeds what you made as a passive income that year. Again, as good business operators know, you're always
So
trying
if that
to.
makes it, if it offsets, right, that brings your income to zero. If your income is zero or less than zero, you don't pay taxes on that income.
Exactly, exactly. And good business owners know that you're always trying to drive your income down to zero, right? So you don't pay any taxes.
Mhm.
But things get really cool when you do a cost segregation. I mean, you can get way more passive losses. I mean, sometimes I'll see like $60,000, $80,000 comebacks on a $100,000 investment, and you only made maybe $5,000 that year in income, but you have like an $80,000 loss. So a net of a $75,000 loss, which you can use the passive losses.
You apply those to other income areas?
Yes, so you cannot use passive losses to offset ordinary income unless you are a real estate professional on designation on taxes and you meet a few more criteria. But this is the magic here, right? So like a very common scenario is I have a doctor or a lawyer, high paid salary, where they make maybe
Yeah.
600,000 a year. Their spouse does some real estate stuff. They play the real estate professional status on taxes. Now they can use whatever passive losses they have to offset and lower their AGI down to whatever they want.
That's really fascinating. And so that's how the rich play the tax game, right? Is they're not actually just going with, hey, here's what your income is and here's how much you owe on it. They're looking at how they use their real estate um, paper losses to reduce that AGI to the level that is acceptable to them.
Right. At least like the big strategy is get it out of the red zone, right? Get it under $330,000 or so at AGI, because when you're above that, that's where you're getting killed. Or in the Biden plan, like he's gonna kill $400,000 income earners and higher. So you go right up to 399, right? I don't know what the strategy is gonna be this time 2 years from now when all the changes happen, but that's generally the strategy. And I know people think, these guys are jerks, right? They don't pay any taxes, but this is what the tax code is. It's incentivizing. They want people like us to be infusing our capital into the economy, right? We're the ones that deserve the tax breaks.
Mhm.
It's the people who sit on their money under their mattress, not doing anything. You have to pay taxes. That's the deal.
Yeah, so because you're actually taking the capital that you have and investing it back into the economy, whether you're buying property or upgrading property or whatever it is you're doing with it, you're creating um, you're creating more value in the economy that wasn't there before.
Right.
It's
In the
really
midst of
incentivize that
pandemic,
action.
right? In the midst of a pandemic, we were the ones putting in money into the economy where people are kind of frozen.
Absolutely. So how does I know since we're talking about taxes, I know one of the things really interesting with property is you can do cash out refinances on equity, and when you pull out the loans, those loan dollars are tax free as well. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. So when you pull out the money, it is not a taxable event. But when we sell assets that you have to recapture all the depreciation that you took and you have to pay your
Mhm.
capital gains. But we play this game where we're on this, I call it the simple passive cash flow gravy train or God mode. I don't know what I call it yet, but
I like
most of
God mode.
investors that do this stuff, we have several $100,000 of passive losses, a big pillow to cushion any type of capital gain or depreciation recapture. And then what do we do with that money? Well, we're investors, so we deploy that into several deals and grab even more passive losses. It's just this kind of good vicious cycle we live on. So
Yeah,
we
yeah. So
don't do
that's
we
the
don't
1031 exchange.
no, we don't do 1031s. I don't like 1031
Okay.
exchanges at all. I don't know why anybody does them. If you have several $100,000 of passive losses, you should just be simply taking your passive losses, offsetting your income that year, your capital gain and your depreciation recapture.
And then you
right?
don't
And
have the
then
requirement of reinvesting that the 1031 requires.
that's correct. That's correct. So to me, it's all a moot point. They say they're gonna get rid of that 1031 exchange. I don't think they are, but if they do, we don't care, right? And this is the example of like the wealthy always find a way to kind of do things where it kind of flies underneath the radar, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really, really interesting sort of way to look at how you manage your money.
The Hero Show will be right back. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. You're listening to The Hero Show, unlocking the power of influence and success.
So, one of the things you have listed on here is not using your retirement account as an investment vehicle. And I know a lot of people, if they're looking at maybe buying a rental property, they're looking at getting the down payment from, say, their 401k or something. Why do you not recommend doing that?
Well, I mean, the retirement funds, like as I mentioned, right? Like you want to invest outside your retirement funds to play this game, right? Get the passive losses. When you invest through a retirement account, you can self-direct your IRA, your Roth, or take your 401k out in an in-service transaction and invest it. But when you're doing it in that QRP, the qualified retirement plan money, you don't get the losses, the paper losses from it. And that's one of the big reasons why we do this whole shenanigan, right? So that's why I would rather have my money out to play with and invest via cash. Include that with all the other, all the things we've kind of mentioned at the start of the show with, paying taxes today and that type of stuff. And to kind of close the loop on that, right? Like that's one of the biggest, that's the government's biggest potential revenue stream right there, is all these untaxed retirement funds that are going to get taxed at some point, right? They just kind of, it's like a blank check for them. It's like they have a lien on your retirement funds. I want my money out of that stuff.
So for those of us who may be at the beginning of wanting to take either the extra money that our business is throwing off or the extra income from our jobs, if that's where we're at, wants to get started playing in this game and creating passive income and then using the paper losses to offset the stuff. Because I know one of the things that like I'm running into right now in my business, I've just hit the point where like I need to do something from an investment standpoint that otherwise I'm starting to owe a lot of money in taxes. And I don't have any way to, the business costs what it costs. So I can't like adjust my, my, what do you call it? The depreciation, whatnot on the business. So how do you recommend sort of getting started in the real estate space? And can that help with the income that you're generating either from your business or from your job?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not gonna be overnight. I mean, I would say, get used to owning rental properties, understand the game. It's not that complicated. Once you do it for 6 months, you're kind of an expert at that point. But depending where your net worth is, and I call this the journey to simple passive cash. So there's a progression, right? If your net worth is under $500,000, it's go and buy a turnkey rental, right? Your highest and best use is going and buying just a turnkey rental, right? Spend your time on your business, right? So a lot of my clients are high paid doctors, lawyers, engineers. That's what they should do, right? Not screw around with all these like flipping houses, wholesaling, these really active real estate activities. We do more passive stuff. So buy a turnkey rental. So what a turnkey rental is like a rehabber will buy a house, like a cheap house. They'll fix it up, put in new carpet or new flooring, new appliances. They'll fix the plumbing, they'll fix the roof, all the big major components they'll revamp. Sometimes they'll even put a tenant in there for you. So it's kind of like a rental property with training wheels, right? You can just step into.
Yeah.
If your net worth is higher than that and you're making a lot of money, you definitely, if you're a accredited investor, syndications, private placements is probably the way to go. But the problem there is, you don't have that network around. You don't have that peer group to be able to vet operators or deals. So I would just say, hey, just educate yourself in this space. Like listen to my podcast. It's more geared towards high paid professionals, more affluent investors, who are geared up to be more passive. It's just get about educating yourself.
Interesting. So you start off with turnkey rental, and you just, I guess, reinvest that back into getting a few more turnkey rentals until you sort of hit that net worth, would you call it, like bar that you were mentioning, that $500,000 net worth?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, roughly, right? I mean, they can check out my article, simplepassivecashflow.com/syndication. I have a little chart based on how much money you're making and what your net worth is to kind of dictate where do you go. I'm the engineer, so I got like all charts and graphs kind of telling you which way to kind
Yeah.
of go on this decision matrix. But I've had guys like, like doctors before that are super busy and they just want to learn. So they go buy a rental property, even though I say, yeah, man, that's a waste of time, right? For you to spend all this money to deploy, $50,000, $100,000 of capital is a waste of your time. But hey, more power to them. That's how you learn the best, right? By starting with the small stuff. Because once you go to the big stuff, it's easier. You become a dummy real fast. You don't learn too much, right? And
Yeah.
that's
So one of the things that I'm struggling with in my head is you're saying like $500,000 net worth, and I'm like, because I'm a Southern California boy, so like that's not even a whole house. That's like half a house in the Southern California market. So I imagine you're talking about turnkey rentals in other parts of the country where it's going to take a few properties to actually hit that kind of a passive or sorry, a net worth.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't buy properties in primary markets like California. We stick to secondary and tertiary markets. So places like Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Little Rock, Cincinnati, Cleveland, like places like that, where the big criteria is 1% rent to value ratio or higher, nothing less. So you take the monthly rent divided by the purchase price, and that needs to be 1% or higher. So a lot of the atypical turnkey rentals are $1,000 a month rent and $100,000 purchase price, 1%. So like you buy a house in Southern California for 400 grand in the ghetto, probably. We don't buy properties in the ghetto.
Yeah.
That rents for 2 grand. 2,000 divided by 400,000 is 0.5%. That's, as you say in Southern California, no bueno. That ain't gonna work. Look elsewhere, right? But most investors, as I
So
said, buy that stuff because they're unsophisticated. They don't think about cash flow.
So when it comes to buying properties like that, like the ones in Kansas City and other places where they have that 1%, rent to value ratio, you said like you're in Hawaii. So how are you doing? Like, I know because a lot of investors are thinking I have to buy in my backyard, right? I have to be able to go put boots on the ground and see the property or meet the people who are going to be renting from me. How do you manage that? In your case, I think you said you're in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, I live out here where I want, but invest where the numbers make sense. And yeah, it is daunting. I'm not gonna lie, right? Like you're going to a place that maybe you've never visited, and you're gonna buy properties that you may never ever visit either. So it's all about building a team of professional property managers, brokers, and getting a third-party property inspector. The lender is going to be doing the due diligence on the appraisal and the title, so you're covered there. But this is where you have to build your network of other peer accredited and other passive investors to get referrals from them, build organic relationships with people and get referrals from them. And this is where I kind of created my network to kind of help people out doing that. But this is like it's not that hard, right? But it's a different way of thinking for sure. Um,
Yeah.
People want to help you because you're going to buy more properties, you're going to do business with them again. I mean,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So my next question for you then is, I guess it's just something in my head that I've not figured out how you work out, because I know there's a delineation between properties where when you get the loan on it, you're personally guaranteeing the loan with your own credit score and stuff like that. I know at some point you get to the point where the loan is done on the property and the numbers of the property. Where does that sort of shift happen in the types of properties you're investing in?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is when you go over 5 units, so like a quadplex or bigger, you're getting what's called a commercial loan, and it's more asset based. But unless you go over like 50 or 60 units, those loans, that's like no man's land in terms of lending world. So what I advocate for people is, get some experience, get your net worth up to $500,000, but then skip completely over this mom and pop investor world where you're getting a sixplex, an eightplex, a 12plex, a 32plex, and go into being an LP in a syndicator's deal, a country club deal, where, I mean, this is why I do what I do, because we get loans where it's $1 million loan size or more, that's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac backed. It's 10 to 15-year terms, super low interest rates, interest only for several years. It's phenomenal, and the biggest thing is non-recourse. So we as the sponsors put the loans in our personal names, and it's non-recourse. It's amazing.
That's really interesting. So you're getting into big properties then, and with non-recourse terms.
Right, with better economies of scale, and just more stable assets, more institutional assets. But yeah, if you're a lot of these buy-ins into these syndications are.
Yeah, so what I was gonna ask about those syndications, like what's the actual like the work involved for you to get into a syndication asset like that? Because I know you mentioned like once the deal's done, you're just cashing checks, but like what does it take for you to actually get involved in one of those?
You're right. I mean, as a LP passive investor, you don't do jack. You don't do anything. It's all the general partners, the guys flying in the airplane in the cockpit. They do everything. They put the loans in their name. They operate the asset. They send out distributions. You're just a passive investor. But all the due diligence and the hard work is on the front end, building your network with other people to figure out who are the trustworthy people out there. And there's a little bit of a legwork with that, right? Building relationships, getting out of your comfort zone, talking to people. It's not for everybody. If you can't do that, well, that's what the crowdfunding websites are, right? That's the leftovers that people couldn't find investors for, that they just threw out there on the internet, and you can invest for $1,000 a piece. But I wouldn't necessarily say they're good deals.
Yeah, interesting. So there's definitely a lot of really fascinating things to talk about when it comes to, investing the way the wealthy do. So what I want to do, since we sort of hit that 30-minute point, is where can people go if they want to learn more about how to take the money that either their business or their high-paying jobs are throwing off and investing them into real estate? Where can they go to learn more about this from you, and maybe start actually taking some action on that?
Yeah, so if your net worth is under $500,000, I would say start off buying a single family home turnkey rental, that will likely be remote to you. I've got a lot of free content on when I first started my podcast back in 2016. This is all I talked about. So it's a lot of tactical information on there. Podcast is Simple Passive Cash Flow. I've got an e-course, simplepassivecashflow.com, if you want to check that out. But those last few years, I became more of an accredited investor. So I've been kind of changing my style of investing, and I've kind of been doing it's more in the tax, right? You start off with deals, right? You grow your net worth, but then you start to discover these other wealth building activities like paying no taxes, infinite banking, passive losses, and this is kind of like the progression of an investor. So if they kind of listen to the podcast, it kind of goes through a story, of kind of my investing story. But a lot of it's free on my website, Simple Passive Cash Flow, and that was kind of a big passion of mine. I'm a little upset of like how there's bad financial advice out there, right? Like buy a house to live in and invest in your 401k. A lot of it's just created by Wall Street so that all these hardworking Americans have to slave away at a job for 30 or 40 years, right? Like imagine a world where you just bought a rental property, and then you bought a rental property the next year. I mean, most of my guys save 30 grand every year, 50 grand every year, so they can buy 1 or 2 rental properties every year. If they just did that for a few years, they'd be set, right? Society would not function, right? Like nobody would make coffee. at Starbucks if that was the case. And
because everyone was investing.
exactly. But there's a lot of hardworking, like I came from corporate
Absolutely.
America where there's a lot of hardworking people that just slave away every day and are so stressed out. To me, those are the people that need this the most.
So as a final question here before we hop off, how much time do you actually invest into your real estate business today?
Well, I'm an operator.
Like on a daily basis?
I have a 4,200 rental units and I have my education side. I mean, I work about probably 10, 12 hours a day. But I tell my passive investors in my mastermind, I'm like, if you guys are spending more than like a few hours a month doing this, you're doing it the wrong way, right? Passive investing should not take you that long, you know?
I like it. That's that's the next step I need to take. I actually put it on my my goal list for this next year is to start taking some of the profits from my business and putting into real estate, because I know that's the next stage of growth for us, is figuring out how to take what the business is creating and putting it into to investments that will last long term.
Yeah, for sure, man. If you need some help, let me know. I mean, it's kind of like swimming, right? Like I'm a horrible swimmer. If you watch me, I'm just thrashing in the water. But like if you'd watch good swimmers, it's like low speed, like high speed, low drag, right? Like there's no noise, right? I think that's the biggest thing with real estate. Like there's just so much noise about like if you don't have any money, here's all these strategies, which to me are just time wasters to me, right? If you're a higher paid, higher net worth guy, it's super simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for coming back on today, Lane. It was fascinating to talk to you. It always is to speak with people who are playing their game at a really high level. So if you are listening to this and you got a chance to, and your business is either throwing off the cash or your high-paying job is throwing off the cash, you want to get into real estate investing, definitely check out simplepassivecashflow.com. I will make sure that there's a link for it in the show notes for you. And again, Lane, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit more about some of these tactics and strategies today.
Cool. Thanks, Richard.
Okay, bye guys.